Hi everyone, welcome to Redesigning School Counseling. This is the webinar for first-year schools, and the focus of this webinar will be on the creation of the Advisory Council. My name is Sue Reynolds. I'm the Executive Director of the American Student Achievement Institute. So a little bit about our organization. We were incorporated in 1996. We are founded by school counselors. We're located in Bloomington, Indiana. Our mission is to raise student achievement and close achievement gaps. And our goal then is to increase the percentage of students who enter post-secondary and succeed in post-secondary education. The expertise that we bring to the table is we have a lot of knowledge about vision-based, data-driven, and systemic change. We also have a lot of experience in creating statewide movements. RSC, or Redesigning School Counseling, is one of several initiatives that we do, and we're very fortunate that to have a board that allows us to provide this initiative to schools at no cost. Here's just a little bit about me as we get started together. I tend to do things I've discovered in 10-year segments. I was a science teacher for 10 years, school counselor for 10 years, then I went to the Department of Ed in Indiana for 10 years as a school counseling consultant. In my professional association work, I was executive director of ISCA, the Indiana School Counselor Association, also for 10 years. I also was on the ASCA board for a while. I was their secondary VP. I chaired the ASCA Leadership Development Institute. One of the things that I was very pleased with is that I founded the ASCA Developmental School Counseling Task Force. This was at a time when developmental school counseling was just coming to be, and there was a lot of debate about whether or not preventative school counseling or developmental school counseling should even be in place, or if it should all be responsive. And I was really happy to be involved in creating that task force and then doing some of the initial work with that. I also, while on the board, I made a motion to propose that we have national standards, and played a role in helping to create the first set of standards. In the organization where I'm at now, the American Student Achievement Institute, I founded this organization just as a vehicle where I could, do the kind of work that I wanted to do. I'm now serving as my title has just changed. I'm now serving as president. I also have received a couple of awards. The School Counselor Award both in Indiana and nationally. But I have to tell you, I probably was not the best school counselor in the world, but I think what I was able to do is to create a program where lots of different folks could provide sound school counseling activities. And so I've always thought that while it was kind of nice to receive those awards, it probably should have been the other counselors in my building and our teacher advisors and our community people that got involved in our program, and really everybody was what delivered that program. That was not me. So at any rate, so that's just a little bit about me, and I always think it's helpful when you're hearing a presenter or working with a new coach or mentor that that you kind of know a little bit about their background and what they bring to the table. So that's me. Okay, so I would like to keep this really informal, and if you have questions or want to discuss as we're going, raise your hand, and there's several places where I'm just going to stop and ask you, do you have any questions? Okay, so basically here's our agenda for today. We have not met since last spring, and I just want to very briefly go over terminology, our beliefs, and the process that we're using this year. And then specifically we'll look at this month, and our task for this month is to create your advisory council. We'll look at the submissions that are coming in now in August. We'll also look at the RSC manual and the online system. So we hope that when we finish this webinar, exactly what needs to happen in August and how to make that happen. Okay, so a little bit of review. First of all, the terminology. Just remember that we believe that there are 4 different types of counseling activities, school counseling activities. One is guidance. And the guidance activities are activities that enable students to master the guidance standards, and as a result of mastering those standards, students then will make sound choices in areas that impact high achievement. So the one thing to think about when we use the word guidance is we're really talking about knowledge here. When school counselors are in a guidance mode, we're in a teaching mode. We're teaching kids about the SAT or ACT. We're teaching kids where to get extra help in the school. We're teaching kids how to be assertive rather than aggressive. So we're kind of in a teaching mode there. And the other thing about guidance is that it's for all kids, that just like all kids need to learn content in math, we believe that all kids need to learn content in the areas of academic, career, and personal social development. So it's for every student in the building. Counseling, on the other hand, is activities that help some students address personal and social problems that are interfering with learning. Because we're school counselors, we really think it's important that we're addressing personal and social problems that interfere with learning. And in this case, counseling is not for all kids. If your student body is fairly typical, about 1 out of 5 students in your building will have some type of personal or social problem that's interfering with their learning. So if we can help to address those issues, kids will be in a better situation to learn in your school. The other 2 types of activities that counselors do, one are advocacy activities. Those are activities that promote systemic change or that promote the needs of an individual student. So let's say, for example, that there's a course that's being offered in your school, and one of the prerequisites is that kids are being asked to purchase a lot of materials as a prerequisite for enrollment in that course. And you know that your low-income kids aren't going to be able to afford that. And so on their behalf, you go to the administration or to that department to advocate for removing that prerequisite so that all kids can enroll in that course. That would be an advocacy activity that counselors do, and we think that that is a legitimate use of counselor time. And then the second one there is to advocate for the needs of an individual student. So it may be that there's a student that's having an issue with a teacher, and maybe the teacher is not where the teacher needs to be, and so you're advocating on behalf of that student, or you're at a case conference advocating for a student. That would be advocacy, and we also think that that's a legitimate use of counselor time. Management activities are activities that usually, or really almost always, happen behind the scenes. They're what counselors do to enable the school counseling program to run smoothly and effectively. So doing professional development is management. Doing program development, what we're doing right now, is management. Networking, building relationships with folks so that you can better deliver your program, is management. And evaluation. So those are common types of management programs. I always would like to think when I started my day in the schools, the first thing I always did was write passes, and I had to do that to make my program run so I could talk to kids. That was a management activity. So everything you do behind the scenes, you're not face-to-face with kids, is kind of behind the scenes things that you're doing to make your program run smoothly and effectively, is management. And then we have a 5th kind of activity which really has nothing to do with school counseling. And we call those activities non-program activities. Those are activities that do not help students master a guidance standard or address a personal social issue that's interfering with learning. So those are non-program activities. They have nothing to do with counseling. They have nothing to do with guidance or advocacy or program management. They really have nothing to do with school counseling at all. So here are examples. A lot of times school counselors are asked to be administrators. They are asked to administer the state tests or create state reports or administer special ed or do substitute teaching or attendance. That's administrative tasks, and those are good tasks. I mean, somebody has to do those things, but they're not part of school counseling. And so when counselors do those things, we call them non-program. Same thing in record keeping, generating report cards, calculating GPAs, doing transcripts, honor rolls. Again, those are good activities. Somebody's got to do them, but when counselors do it, it's non-program. And then scheduling, creating a master schedule or a teacher schedule, balancing class loads, and then other things like managing the awards program or the graduation or taking care of discipline. You know, those are all things that have to happen in the school. They're not bad activities, but they're just not school counseling activities. So we know in Indiana and across the country that there are you know, many counselors are spending 90% of their time doing those things. When I first started my first years of school counseling, I spent 90% of my time doing these things, very little time with kids and parents. So we want to name these things because we want to be able to talk about them, but we also want to alert everybody that as we're talking about them, they really have nothing to do with school counseling, and they take counselors away from those school counseling activities. Okay, so here's our beliefs very quickly. We believe, and RSC is based on this belief, that school counseling programs help students make sound choices in areas that impact academic success. So RSC is, the whole RSC program is designed around helping kids make good choices. And as school counselors, they're designed to help kids make choices, good choices, in areas that impact academic success, because as school counselors, that really is our focus, is academic success. This we call our impact pyramid, and basically it's the same thing as just in a schematic. We believe that when students are involved in sound guidance and counseling programs, they make good choices in areas that impact achievement, and as a result, achievement goes up. We have data now from the University of Scranton and University of Connecticut that shows in a scientific study that statistically schools that have been through the RSC process and have met all of our standards for program design have higher academic achievement than schools that we don't work with. So we know that in those schools, or we suspect that in those schools, that the reason that that's happening is because those kids are making better choices. Then in terms of the program design that you're doing this year, we're just going to start with this pyramid and work it backwards. We're going to start with what are the academic goals that are in your school improvement plan, what is your school trying to achieve academically, and then we'll say, okay, well, in order to reach those goals, what choices do kids need to make? And that'll become the focus of your program design, helping kids make those choices. And then finally, we'll design the guidance activities that you need and the counseling activities that you need in order to help kids make those choices. In terms of looking at what data, what level of this pyramid really is an indicator of the health of your school counseling program, it's those student choices. We want to be able to show with data that student choices have changed over time because of the guidance and counseling activities that you're implementing. So that's the program design pyramid. Okay, let me pause here, see if anybody has any questions. I'm not seeing any hands up. I'll give a second for anybody to pop in with a question if they want to. That was all review. You've heard it before, but we always start out with a review just to make sure everybody's on the same page. Okay, let's go on. So this is the process that we're using this year. Actually, the first step of this process we've already done. You have done the tasks last spring and this summer to get ready to have your meetings with your advisory council. So you had your, you've put together your steering team, you've collected your data, you've done your surveys, you answered the self-study questions over the summer, and now we're ready to put together your advisory council. So this webinar is focused on convening and getting together a really powerful advisory council that's really going to be helpful. So after you get that advisory council together, then in September you'll have the first meeting with them. That'll just be introduction. The second meeting you'll look at creating a vision. The third meeting you'll look at, okay, what are all the choices that kids need to make in our school in order for us to have high achievement? you're going to come up with probably in your advisory council, you may come up with 70, 80, 90 different things that kids have to make good choices, turning in their homework, coming to school, asking for help, not punching somebody when they're mad, doing career exploration activities. There's a lot of choices that kids need to make in order to successfully get through school. So we'll define all of those choices in step 3. We'll give you lots of resources so that you can do that quickly. Then in step 4, we're going to say, okay, there's way too much to do. Let's look and see, first of all, how can we get more time and energy? So in step 4A, your advisory council will talk about how can we get more time, how can we get more energy, how can we get more resources for our counselors. It's not totally uncommon in this step for schools to decide that they need more counselors or they need more funding, or whatever they're short of, or for people to step up and say, I can do some of those non-program tasks so that you can have more time to be with kids and parents. So it's really kind of it's a wonderful discussion. Then after we've expanded resources, then we take those 70, 80, 90 different choices that kids have to make and we say, okay, which ones do we really want to focus on because they're really important and kids aren't making those choices where we want them to be right now. So you'll come up with what we call priority goals. That could just be one thing. It might be just we want kids to turn in their homework, or we want kids to enroll in AP courses, or we want kids to talk to their parents about post-secondary. And those will become your priority goals. Then in the next step we want to know, why aren't kids making those priority goals? Is it because they don't know something that they need to know in order to make that choice? Or is it because they've got personal or social issues that are just interfering with all of their choices? Or maybe we're not giving them an opportunity. Maybe they're not taking an AP course because we don't offer enough sections of AP. So we'll do a root cause analysis to figure out why kids aren't doing what we want them, aren't making the choices that we want them to be making. Once we know the why, then we'll go to the activities. And if it's a lack of knowledge, then we'll drop in some guidance activities, or we'll tweak the activities we already have to make them more powerful. If they have social personal issues that are getting in the way, we'll look at our counseling activities. Or if it's opportunities, then we'll look at advocacy for opportunities for kids. And then the last type of counseling activity is the management part. So we'll design that all. And then the final part is to prepare, and we'll write guidance lesson plans. We'll create a program calendar for the next school year, individual calendars, and then we'll create a budget. A lot of times we think we can't do activities because we don't have the money for them, but in this process we're going to find the money for what you need. So that's it. So it starts out with visioning and dreaming, and then it's going to come down to action and doing, and the data we have shows that it makes a difference. So I'm going to ask, that was review, so I don't anticipate a lot of questions, but let's just see any hands up. Okay, so now let's move on to new stuff. So today we're going to talk about putting together your advisory council. This is incredibly important. It's also a little scary because you're kind of, letting other people come in to evaluate what you're doing and tell you what they think you should be doing. I know for me personally, this was a scary step, but I am so glad that I did it, because prior to having an advisory council, all of the decisions that were made by a white middle-class female. And when I brought in the advisory council, which I made sure was quite diverse, I learned so much, and we really ended up with a much more powerful program because the input in designing it was so diverse. So, question, why convene an advisory council? That's kind of why, because we want it to be a diverse group, that your program is based on the perspectives of lots of different kinds of people. So we want your advisory council to mirror the community. If you have a large Hispanic community, then we want to make sure that there's a good portion of your advisory council that is Hispanic. If there's a large African American population, then we want to make sure that they're represented. Also with economic level, if you have 70% of your kids that are receiving free or reduced lunch, then we want to make sure that the low income is represented on your advisory council. Same thing with gender. A lot of times school counseling tends to be a lot female. We want to make sure that we've got male perspective on your advisory council. And then geographic location. Especially in school districts that have consolidated, that we want to make sure that we have people from many different communities. So one of the things that you'll need to think about is what communities exist within your school, and then geographically make sure you have voices from all those different communities. Okay, so also another thing to think about when bringing two people to the table is we want to make sure that you've got some people at the table who are going to be able to allocate resources, the biggest resource being time. If you can get your principal or another administrator to be at the table, that would be wonderful. People that have the ability to allocate funding, like a community foundation would be great to have at the table, because later if you discover, we'd like to do this program, but we need professional development and that costs money, or we need materials and we need this funding, or we want to provide, we want to send kids to post-secondary, but right now we don't have any scholarships that would provide tools for an apprenticeship program after high school. So it's just really helpful down the road to have people that have access to funding at the table at the beginning. So we also want to have at the table people who have access to kids and to parents. So who is reaching kids? Of course your teachers will fill that role, but who in the community? Do you have Boys Club or Girls Club or Boy Scouts or YMCA, or who has the ability to reach kids besides educators? And again, what we're hoping will happen with this is that kids start to get the same message wherever they are. If they're at their faith-based organization, on the weekend, that they're hearing about why academic rigor is so important and how to do a campus visit. It would be really cool if your faith-based organization started doing campus visits with their youth groups. So we want to have groups that have access to kids, and then also people representing groups that have access to parents. Research has shown that kids are going to turn first to their parents for advice, and so part of this down the road, we find that a lot of schools really focus on educating parents. So if there's a PTA, it'd be great to have them at the table. If there's band boosters or athletic boosters, or just anyone that is working with a group of parents, I would suggest getting them to your table. Also, we want to look at who has specific knowledge about global economics. That is huge. You'll hear me say over and over again that I think having somebody who's involved with increasing your local economy, having them at the table is going to be a voice that is going to bring just amazing information that's going to help you design your program. And then finally, be thinking about down the road who can help you provide your guidance lessons. For example, we had in one of our schools, it was a rural school, but there was a Purdue Extension Homemakers Club that were they were a group of 6-year-old women, but they decided that they could help kids learn about where to find merit-based scholarships, and they made it that their clubs that became their mission for years. So who can help you? Do you want to get your Chamber of Commerce involved, because they could help you teach kids how to interview? Who can help you provide those guidance lessons, both in your school and in your community? I've been giving you some examples of community folks. In your school, your family and consumer science teachers, their national curriculum has a lot of career development in it. So if you have a family and consumer science program, that they might be good folks to get to the table, because they could deliver part of the career guidance curriculum for you. If you offer health, a lot of the health curriculum involves social personal growth, and so that could be, you could incorporate some of your guidance curriculum in your health classes. So kind of be thinking about, down the road, who has funding that we might tap into, who has access to folks, who has knowledge, and who could help us provide our guidance lessons. So that's another thing to think about. So here's the third thing to think about. The people on your advisory council are not worker bees. Your steering team is are the worker bees. So these people are just your thinker bees. They're the folks that you want to have come once a month, help you think about stuff, and then they're going to go away and they're not going to probably think about this again until the next month. So your worker bees are the steering team. You're going to be doing the tasks between the advisory council meetings, but the advisory council is really going to help you design a very meaningful program because you'll have so many perspectives at the table. Okay, so here's kind of some suggested makeup. Most of the schools that we work with have an advisory council of 20 to 30. We suggest that you have teachers representing all grade levels and all subjects, that you have students representing all grade levels and all programs. So if you have a high ability program or gifted and talented, you make sure you have some students on your advisory council that are high ability, some general ed, special ed, some that are college prep, some that are career and tech ed prep. Just all different kinds of students. Also your counselors, administrators, especially if you can get whoever's allocating time, that would be wonderful to have on your advisory council. Your representatives from your feeder schools, and representatives from your receiving schools. So if you're a middle school, it'd be somebody from the elementary, somebody from the high school that your kids feed into. If you're a high school, it would be somebody from post-secondary that your kids are going on to. So, so that's the school side. Then in the community side, parents, of course, all grade levels, all programs, economic development, I'm going to talk more about that. I know in most of our schools, they say that the economic development just had help them come up with the biggest ahas, and were such creative thinkers, and really saw a need for student guidance and counseling, and we became huge advocates. Business community, community foundations, there's that access to funding. Your media, in most of our schools that involve the media, we end up with very positive newspaper articles about the school counseling program because the media then gets it. Also publicity for all of your programs that are coming up. I mean, it's just getting them involved is really good. Youth service organizations, we talked about, faith-based organizations, all service clubs. Probably, we did a quick study, probably 80% of the service clubs have in their mission in one way or another serving youth. And so a lot of times they're looking for projects to do. So if you're involving them and they think, oh, well, we could come in and help kids do internships or job shadowing, or we could, sponsor a field trip and help kids get to college campuses to look at them, take our fifth graders to college campuses. Your public library can create, sections of the library that are aligned with your guidance curriculum. Different agencies, including your local mental health agency, and then local government. So, excuse me. So really the advisory council is robust. But I tell you, once they get going and once they understand what you're doing, all these groups love kids and they love your community's kids. And once they understand what you're trying to do, they will be behind you and they will be your advocates. Across the board, it's happened at every single school that we've worked with. So I really encourage you to take this step seriously and to make sure that you've got these folks at the table. So economic development, everybody has economic development groups. What I found in Cyprus was in Texas was the Cypher Houston Chamber of Commerce. There's a section of their work that is all about economic development. And Pittsburgh has the Pittsburgh Regional Alliance. And then, all over, every community is trying to draw business, especially high-skill, high-wage business to their communities. And one of the biggest draws is having an educated workforce. So economic development is usually really eager to get at the table. They have lots of ways to control their material resources, but this gives them a way to impact the human resources, and I think they'll be eager to come to your table. Business representatives, This is a place where I think I can give a couple of tips that will be helpful. A lot of times when schools are trying to get a business rep, they'll like call a bank, and the bank will send a bank teller, and that bank teller is a wonderful person, but they're not responsible for thinking about where our human resources going to come from 10 years from now. So we would suggest that you call the vice president in charge of human resources from a Fortune 500 company and explain to them what you're doing, and that you're trying to increase academic rigor in your community, and that your objective is to get more citizens with a post-secondary credential, and that this would give them a time to impact the human resources of the future. And I think they'll be there. At least in the other schools that we've worked with, they've been eager to come. Community foundations we've talked about. Community foundations like this type of program because they have access to funding. But most community foundations do not have a large staff, and they cannot do program development. So if you're doing the program development and you're taking care of that part, and it's all data-based and it's all soundly developed, then they're usually very eager to come in with the funding. They like that type of partnership because they don't have the resources to do the program development, but they do have the funding. You, on the other hand, do have the resources to do program development, but you don't have the funding. So it's a good match. So really encourage you to invite them to come. Service clubs I've mentioned. All of these service clubs are probably some of the better known ones across the country, and they all have something about youth in their mission statements. So I'd encourage you to get them as well. They can deliver programs that can help you deliver your guidance curriculum. We often get the question if you are working with more than one school in your district, and typically what will happen is one school will come in, do RSC, and then they start to share their results with the school board and with other principals, and then other schools from the district will come in. We do want each school to have a separate advisory council, and that's for two reasons. One is because the students are different in every building. The other reason is that the politics are different in every building. So it's fine to have more than one school in RSC, and there's points, if you do get other schools in your district that come in, there are points where we can help you see where you can combine efforts at certain points to save time. But we do want every school to have a separate council. Okay, so what are people getting into if they agree to be on your council? One is they're going to attend, actually that's 5, they're going to attend 5 monthly advisory council meetings beginning in September, and their job is to be a thinker bee, to provide input on what's coming up, and then to provide feedback on what just happened. And then it just naturally happens. We won't ask them to do this, but once they get to know you and they get to know your program and your needs, they just naturally become your advocates. They will become your cheerleaders. They'll be the one that when the school board is thinking about getting rid of a counselor, they'll be the ones that go to the school board and say, you cannot get rid of this counselor. You'd be, hurting the program. So they become advocates. And then down the road, also the light bulb will go off. This may not happen for 2 or 3 years, but the light bulb will go off that they could help implement those guidance activities, that they could take kids on a campus visit, that they could come to your school and do a mock interview with every kid. So that we don't ask them to do that in the beginning. In the beginning they're just thinker bees. We just let those last 2 things just happen naturally, and they do. Okay, pause here. I don't see anybody with hands up or questions, but I'll give you a second to just put that up. And I know looks like we're going to run a little bit late. I'm thinking maybe another 10 minutes we'll be finished. Okay, so this month's submissions, after you have your advisory council meeting, after you've set up your advisory council, you'll be submitting your advisory council roster, and we check to make sure that your advisory council includes representatives that are students, teachers, parents, business community, and community organizations. So those are the 5 types of folks that we want to be at your table. We don't look for a specific number, although schools that do this will have 20 or 30. And then also on the roster, we just want to make sure that you have contact information for all of your folks so that you can notify them about all kinds of stuff. And so we're looking to make sure that you've collected their names, phone numbers, and email addresses. And then at your first meeting, you won't be able to enter this right now, and let's make a note of that. The last thing there, perspectives, you won't be able to enter that right now, but at the first meeting we're going to ask each person to identify a group that they could represent. So a Hispanic third grade parent might say, well, I can represent Hispanic third grade parents, or your person from the chamber might say, well, we can represent our local businesses. So we know why we've invited them to the table, but we don't want to say, we invited you because you're the parent of a low-income kid. So we're letting people come up with their own who can they represent at the table. That's also really positive because then if they don't come to a meeting, they know that that voice is not represented in the discussion. So it tends to get them at the meeting when they realize that they're representing a population. Okay, the next one, the task that we would like you to do this month is narrative questions. I'll show you where those are. A lot of those are questions that ASCA would like to see for the RAMP award. So we put all those in as a narrative section where there's a question and then there's a text box and you type it in. I'll show you those in a sec. And then time task logs, we talked about that last spring. You can look back at last spring's work on the process page if you have forgotten how to do that. But hopefully that happened all spring, and what we need to be submitted is for each counselor we need a first semester weekly calendar and a second semester weekly calendar. So that's basically just a time task log, a first semester time task log and a second semester time task log. Okay, so those are the tasks. I want to look at the manual and then well, here's the manual. The resources we've given you are a document that will help you brainstorm who will be on your advisory council, talking points for what to say on that first phone call when you call the advisory council, an introductory letter to send them once they say yes, and then after the meeting a follow-up letter. So just real quickly, here's the council member brainstorm. What we would suggest you do as a steering team is to take this sheet, sit down, take this sheet, and then look at all the different stakeholder groups that we think are in most communities. Circle the ones that are in your communities. Begin with that as step one. So you have students representing different grade levels, students representing different ethnic groups. Down the parents section, you have parents of students. In your community, you have parents of students representing different grade levels. So circle the different stakeholder groups and then go back and talk about, okay, who could we invite to be on our council to represent that population. So it's kind of a two-step process. The first step is identifying which stakeholder groups exist, and then the second step is to identify who you're going to ask. Another thing is like on your on the service clubs. If you don't know anybody that's a member of the service club, you could just call their president and say, we'd like to invite somebody. Could you appoint somebody to be on our advisory council? So when you're actually making those phone calls, of course, I would divvy it up between your steering team members so that each of you calls 5 people or whatever. Okay, here's talking points, and again, it's just some suggestions of what to say when you first call people. And then here is an intro letter that you can just, if you like it just how it is, just cut and paste it onto your letterhead or edit it or write your own. It doesn't matter. We're just trying to do some of the grunt work to save you time. Okay, I see one hand up, and then we'll move on to show you the online system. That'll take 2 seconds, and then we'll finish up. So, Andrea, question?
Yes. So our time and task logs, are those submitted weekly, or is it just a sample week from the first semester and a sample from the second?
Yeah, it's just a sample from each. So there does have to be one from each counselor. So if you had, well, I think in your case you have 2, right?
Right.
Okay, so in year 2, you have 2 counselors, so each of you would have a time task log from 1 week in the spring semester and then 1 week in the fall semester.
Okay, so oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
We've been keeping them for every single week since,
oh, yeah.
So you're just asking, just keep those on our computers, but just submit one sample.
Right. So when we get to meeting, it's the priority goals meeting, which I think is meeting 4. When we get to that meeting, we're going to tally all of those time task logs that you've been keeping every week, and then we'll present that data to your advisory council. And that also, normally what happens is the advisory council will say, you know, we want to tackle more priority goals. And then you'll say, I don't have any time. And then they'll say, well, why don't you have time? And then you've got that data right there, and you'll be able to say, I'm spending 50% of my time on things that have nothing to do with guidance and counseling. Or they'll want you to do, you know, more counseling, and you'll say, but I'm spending all my time on guidance. And so it just gives you a chance to kind of have that discussion.
Okay. And then the only other thing is we haven't been able to submit 2 time logs. It only allows us to submit 1 for our school.
Right. When you upload, when you use our uploader tool, you can only upload 1 document. That if you do it twice, the second time it takes the place of the first one. So what we suggest you do is to just make a PDF file, and just, you know, with several pages. So you'd have a PDF with 4 pages, 2 from your time task logs, and then 2 from Beth's.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sounds good. And Sharon's got a hand up. Sharon, what questions do we have from Texas?
I kind of wanted to know, are we speaking that every single counselor should do the time log for just 1 semester in the fall?
Yes, yeah.
I'm sorry, 1 week out of the semester.
No, you really want every single counselor to do the time task logs every single day, both from the previous semester, spring semester, and this semester. And the reason for that is, like in a lot of programs, counselors will kind of differentiate their staffing. Yeah. So you may have some counselors that do more group counseling, and others that do more career guidance. Right. And if they don't all do it, then you don't get a real accurate reflection of what your whole program is like. Okay. And I acknowledge for your counselors there, Sharon, that are listening from Cypress Springs. I know that those are a pain in the rear end to do. I did them every day for years. Yeah. So, but I think you just have to trust me that when you get all that data together and you're talking with your advisory council about that data, it's really worth the time, I think, that you put into it.
So if all the counselors haven't done that yet, is this something that we can do now and move forward?
Yes, yeah. I'd go ahead and do it now.
Okay.
When we get to that step in the process, you'll need to explain to your advisory council that it may be, like my guess is it's probably going to be light. Your data will be light on academic guidance, because so much of that academic guidance in the high school happens in the spring when you're doing, when you're doing your courses, signing up for courses. But yeah, you just have to kind of, explain to your council that it's just from the first semester, but that's better than nothing. Yeah.
Okay. Or, the ones that have something from the spring, we can go ahead and upload them.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, I had another
let me back up, Sharon. I'm sorry. One of the ASCA requirements is that every counselor then has submitted a spring a week in the spring and a week in the fall. So your counselors that did not do this last spring will need to do it in this coming spring so that we can have all that documentation.
All right.
Okay.
Gotcha. Yeah, because we have 2 new counselors.
Okay. Good.
There's totally, 8 of us, yeah. And the other question that I have is about the advisory council. Mm-hmm. Do we have to, what if we absolutely cannot find a person in a particular category? I mean, is this totally something that we have to keep looking for until we find, like we don't find a community-based person or something like that?
The 5 on that rubric, let me go back here. On this rubric.
Or do we, just keep looking, like say we don't have the business representative by that first advisory council meeting, do we just say that's spot is vacant and we're still looking?
I mean, I guess I would just
go into the meeting?
I would work my tail off to get that business person at the first meeting, yeah, because if they miss that first meeting, they're missing all the vocabulary and the, you know, I tell you, I think you'll be surprised at how easy it is to get people to come. Usually what folks tell us is, you know, that everybody says yes. So,
Okay.
yeah, I'd look at, you know, you can talk to your Chamber of Commerce, talk to, well, you know, what was that Cypress?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, talk to your
There.
chamber, or I'm sure there's some businesses, you know,
Right.
in your community that, or even, you know, probably businesses in Houston are hiring your students. They might be interested in being.
And just out of curiosity, most of the schools that have the advisory council, do they meet in the evening? Has that been just a better time?
That's a good question. We'll talk about that more next month, but to answer it, it depends. Some of them, I think most of them start out meeting in the evening, but then they meet, some of them then switch to, you know, during the workday because people want to just, you know, leave work an hour early and then come to the meeting. So I tell you, I was really committed to my advisory council, and I actually had 2 meetings. I had one in the evening for people that could come at night, and I had one during the day for people that could come during the day. And then I also had a third one of just students. I found that my kids were much more apt to talk if there were not adults in the room. So, but
okay, you kind of broke it up.
Yeah, I did, but that's, you know,
20 to 30 people weren't there at the same time.
Correct. Yeah, yeah, but I think that's probably most schools will just have one meeting, and you know, at the first meeting you can ask people what's the best time to meet.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, good. I just want to show you guys the online system, and then we'll let you go. I'm going to take people's hands up so if you have other questions, I'll see them. Okay. Okay, let's look at the online system. Let's see. I think it's here. And I just pulled up Cypress Springs. I hope that's okay. But there's a couple things I wanted to show you on this. The most important thing, and Andrea, we've got to make sure that you guys do this too. When you log in, actually, let me go back. When you log in, it's going to look like this. If you forget your username, everybody in the school has the same username and password, so whoever you decide is going to do the data entry needs to have that. If you don't have it anymore, when you go to log in, there's a little button that says, did you forget your password? Click here. So, okay, so when you get online, and I think I'll just go ahead and do this let me go ahead and unmute Sharon again so I can ask you questions. We'll just do it. Okay. On RSC uses, we need to make sure that everybody does this. So, Sharon, is it okay if I just do this while we're doing it?
That's wonderful. Please.
Okay, so I'm going to click that you're a first-year school, so I'm going to click first-year process and save. And we need to make sure that the environmental charter school does this too. Then the next set of questions says, does your school currently have RAMP? That answer is no. Are you seeking RAMP? That answer is yes. Right, Sharon?
Correct.
Okay, and then we want to indicate the year. So this would be, let's see, October 2015 would be the year when you guys would be the time you guys have completed your work, and officially everything would go to ASCA either through us or on your own. And then does your school currently have Indiana Gold Star guidance? Eventually this question is going to come off, but the answer of course is no, and you're not seeking it. So, okay, and then we're going to save. Good. Now, when I save those 2 things, that customized your website. So everything now is going to come up for a first-year school, and it will be a first-year school that's seeking to earn the RAMP award. Okay. Now, in the process tab, I know we've looked at that before, and you all have used this because you did your surveys. But now we're down to build your advisory council. The webcast that we're recording right now will be linked here. So if if there's somebody that, like Beth, didn't get to see this, if you want her to see this, Andrea, you can just have her watch the whole thing. So to enter your advisory council roster, you're going to click on Enter, and then you're going to add edit advisory council members, and you just click that. There's nobody here because you haven't done this yet, so you're going to add a new person, and you just are going to add their name, their email, phone, and their perspective. But remember, this is the one we're going to leave blank. We won't know this until after the first meeting. And you know what?
But we could put school counselor, for the counselors that are on the team, correct?
Yeah, I mean, if you know your perspectives right now, you can.
Right.
Yeah, and I think I've asked you all the questions I need to, Sharon. I'm going to go ahead and mute you again so everybody can hear, so you can put me back on speakerphone. Okay. Okay, so then we're just going to save that, or if you get somebody that you want to remove, then you'll just remove them. Remember, anytime you get lost, just go back to the Process tab. I'm just going to hit the back button. It's a little faster. Then the other tool I wanted to show you here is that after you get everyone entered, you can click this report, Email Advisory Council List. So once say your 20, 30 people are in there, click that report, and this will give you a list of everybody's email addresses with commas between them, so that you can just copy that and then put it in the to box for an email that maybe is going out to your advisory council. If you use Microsoft Outlook as your email tool, Microsoft Outlook likes semicolons instead of commas, so just click that, and that will give you everybody's emails with semicolons in between them. Okay, so that's that. Then one of the other things that we said we were going to work on this time was your let's see, I've got to go find it real quickly, was the questions, the narrative questions, and that's in a different section because, well, shoot. Did I just scroll past that? There it is. Okay, I just did a search on the page. So it's in the miscellaneous section. It's down here on Enter Narrative Questions, and you're just going to hit the Enter section. And in the section, it is just a bunch of questions that mainly actually it's all no, it's not all but a lot of it is that they wanted to ask. So let's just open up a couple of them. Like the first one is on counseling services. We couldn't figure out any documentation for you to send us that would actually tell us what's happening in terms of your social personal counseling. So you just click on Enter Edit, and there's always a question, please describe counseling services provided by your school counseling program, and just put in a paragraph that discusses that. I would not make these long. I'd make them just short and concise. We offer group counseling, we offer individual counseling, we offer crisis counseling. Maybe describe your groups a little bit. Just really short. On some of the questions that ASCA has asked, like, let me see if I can find one, like philosophy, vision. When you go into that, you'll notice that when you open it up, there's already something there. And what we did is like one of ASCA's questions was, how was your vision statement developed? Well, we know how your vision statement was developed because you're using our process to do it. So since we know what you're doing, we just went ahead and wrote that paragraph for you. At the end of this, you'll go back, and if you didn't exactly do what we suggested, you would edit this so that it described what you did. But anytime it was a process-related question and we thought we knew what the answer was, we just wrote it for you. We just wrote something for you to start with, and again, just to save you time. So what I would do is, if you've got 4 people on your on your steering team, remember, the steering team of the worker bees, I just divide these questions, into fourths and have everybody do a fourth of them. And again, there's no benefit in writing books and books and books. I would just make it short, concise, accurate, and get it done. Okay, so that's that. Also, don't forget that when you finish the step, just click her off here. And the only other thing I wanted to show you, so we've looked at the Uses tab, we've looked at the Process tab. I'm going to look at Manual, and in the Manual, on the Advisory Council Recruitment, here's that Brainstorm document, and then the talking points and the intro letter. These are all Word documents that you can download to help you. And I think that's it. So let's see if anybody has any other questions. And again, I apologize for going long. I really try to keep these exactly at an hour, and I know we're approaching an hour and a half, which is sometimes happens with our first one of the year, but after this it should be held right at an hour. So let me see if we have any other questions. And I don't think I'm seeing any. Nope. Okay. So no other questions. So here's one. Virgil. And let's see. Virgil says, you mentioned sharing data about the success of RSC that was completed by 2 colleges. Will you share this information on the webinar? And Virgil is watching, we're sharing. So if you send me an email, I can send you the report. It also was in the ASCA Journal, February 2013. And I'd be happy to send you that. What I always do is, you can do a Google search and just look for the ASCA Journal 2013, February 2013, February, and you can get it that way as well. But if you want to send me an email, I'll just attach and send it back to you. So, okay, I don't see any other questions. So, again, thank you so much, and thank you again for engaging the way you did with the surveys. You can't do this program without the data, and both of your schools did just a wonderful job. So that sounds great, and please, I always like to finish with, please remember that you really do make a difference in the lives of your students. So we will talk to you next time, and that's it. Thanks.